So this week I'm going to talk about live streaming, and not just the industry in itself, which is crazy in China. Now I'm going to talk about what it reveals, because when we think about live streaming in China, we often think about consumption. I mean, consumers, 1.4 billion of them, buying online just from influencers who are trying to just make as much money as they can. And so this is all about making money and buying stuff and lots of waste. But there's so much more to live streaming. If you look at the industry, you'll see things like authenticity, like trust, like creativity, like purpose. It's very entertaining. You see a lot of these cool things that really is not what we think about China. We have a different view on China, but live streaming reveals, in my view, the real China. And so I'm going to talk about this. Now, one thing I want to say, that in the description, I have these timestamps. So if you want to jump to another part of the video, you can just go to the timestamp and go directly there. Now, I hope you will like it, and every week I make a video, so do subscribe to my video. There's a lot of things on China, innovation, and of course, like here, it's about a social change and a change of China. So do subscribe, hit that button, and you will follow or be able to follow all my live streams every single week. Last year in China, 2020, the live streaming industry in China was $60 billion US. And it grew 100%, it's crazy, and everybody's talking about live streaming becoming such a big industry. But I think what's more interesting is to look at what it reveals. Because live streaming really reveals the real and true China in many, many aspects. So I'd like to talk a little bit about that. Now, live streaming is often movie stars, music stars, but you also have influencers from the internet. And in China, they're called key opinion leaders, KOLs. And KOLs like Via, which is the most famous one, or Weiya in Chinese, is actually the Chinese Kim Kardashian. And Kim Kardashian, just last year, she was on Alibaba in China. She was live streaming her perfume, and she got about 100,000 followers. So Via thought, I'm going to help out a little bit, and I'm going to help her sell her perfume. She sold 15,000 in a matter of minutes and had 13 million viewers on her show. Every time she goes online, she sells for millions and millions of dollars. This is crazy. But this is the reality of China. It's like 1,000 times more active in the sale of products than most places in the world. Now, you could think, they can sell you anything. So Via is probably the #1 lipstick salesperson in the world. Well, you would be mistaken for thinking that.
In China, the hottest lipstick salesperson is not a woman. It's a man. Meet Li Jiaqi, better known as Lipstick Brother. He's an internet celebrity and the #1 seller of lipstick online. He even took on Alibaba chairman Jack Ma to see who could sell the most lipstick, and Li won.
And so this is the first thing that reveals how China really is. This is about diversity, about authenticity. It's whatever you expect from China, there's going to be the unexpected. And Li Jiaqi is a very good example of it. He's called Austin in English. And so you will see that he also, just like Via can sell you anything, but his fame is actually selling lipstick. And most of the women in China, they love Li Jiaqi. And so they follow him. Another one is called Li Ziqi. She's a woman, 30 years old, who's actually from the countryside in Sichuan province. And she will make these handicrafts and very traditional products or food with everything coming from her past and her own experience as a country girl. And Chinese love her, but it really shows the diversity of China and, most importantly, the authenticity. Because this is about real stories. This is about people that have become extremely popular, very famous, more famous than many in the West, in China. And the reason they've become famous is simply because they tell a real story. It's not propaganda. This is their own life and their own story. And it's very authentic. Now, if you think about these KOLs, key opinion leaders, what you see is that many have become creators. So they've kind of become a brand on their own. They're creating their own products, just like Kim Kardashian with her perfume. But in China, it's anything. It can be handmade products. It can be something creative, or a tattoo artist, or whatever it is. So you see that these influencers, it's not just about telling people crazy things. No, this is about stories. And I think the storytelling is so powerful in China because that actually sells products. And this is how communities and social media gets combined with all these new ideas that people have in China, which we don't hear about much in the West. Now, it all really started with a company called Red, or Xiaohongshu. The live streaming, of course, started earlier. It started in 2014, and then with Taobao Live with Alibaba. But it really started taking off with this company, this platform, that is actually a lifestyle platform. And what Xiaohongshu, or Red, did is basically to allow people to share their experiences. And this was mostly people that went overseas, cross-border. They bought some products, they brought them back, and they showed to people like, yeah, these are great products, these are great things that I like for my life, this is my lifestyle. They started writing about it. And the cool thing about it is that this took really off. And people started following these influencers not because they had to sell something, but because they actually trusted their opinion. And the curator of it was actually pretty good. Which means that the whole live streaming in China, it's not about commerce, it's not about social, it's actually about lifestyle. But that enables commerce and social. And so what we've seen is that the number of platforms have really grown in China. Originally it was like Red and Alibaba or Taobao Live. You had also JD.com, JD Live. You had things like TikTok in China, Douyin. And then of course the newer ones, which is Pinduoduo, which I talked about in other videos, Meituan, and many others. One of the most famous one is Kuaishou. And the big difference between those platforms and Western platforms is that actually they combine everything. They combine social media, they combine commerce, they combine payment, everything in one. And so in China you saw that transactions and actually things like convenience went into community, into social, into e-commerce, and these platforms combine it all. Now we're seeing that happening in the West as well. We're seeing companies like Amazon, companies like Walmart trying to do live streaming. We're seeing more companies like Facebook, Instagram. Everybody's combining this live streaming with social, with payments, with e-commerce, so you can buy through the live streams, interact with the people. But this is very new for the West. For China, it's been more than five years and has been extremely popular. Now, one of the things that we really saw over the past years was that this was evolving to key opinion consumers, KOCs. And a key opinion consumer is like an influencer, a KOL, a key opinion leader. But the big difference is they're just consumers. They just bought some brands and they loved it and they shared it, like on Red, on Xiaohongshu, for a lifestyle. They said, I love this brand, you really have to buy it. And they share that with their friends and their families, people that they trust. And so the cool thing about KOCs is that these are ambassadors for brands, but the brands didn't look for them. They actually started being an ambassador because they like the product, whether it's Nike or Starbucks, or it could be a perfume or anything they think about. And they want to share their stories with their friends. And so this creates the real connection between friends that actually trust them, and because their recommendation, they're buying these products. And so this is really cool. Now, if you look at these KOCs, this has become very big. And one of the companies, the brands in China that took real advantage of this KOC trend is called Perfect Diary. I want to share that because I think it shows that we as Western brands, unless we are going to work with KOCs, we're actually going to get beaten by Chinese brands. And that's what you see in China. A brand, cosmetic brand like Perfect Diary, they started competing against L'Oreal and Estée Lauder and all these Lancôme and all these products which we know so much in the West, luxury brands, cosmetic luxury brands. And Perfect Diary, they figured out that if they use these KOCs, they can change the communication way. Instead of going from one to many, which is advertisement, it's about talking, doing one campaign to many people. Now what they do is one-to-one. It's every ambassador or every customer is becoming an ambassador, and they're making ambassadors of their customers. And then through live streaming, they can stream that to all their friends and all the people that they know. And so this creates a trust level, and the result is that Perfect Diary, which is only 5-6 years old, has actually overtaken many of the Western brands in cosmetics just because people trust these brands. And the interesting thing about that is that they go back to their roots. They go back to the culture of China, the colors of China, the smells of China, the tastes of China. And so all this is put into this brand, and because now their products are at the same quality as any Western product, Chinese actually prefer them. And so this is the trend that is happening. This is going back to your culture, going back to personal communication, one-on-one communication. Now, the whole pandemic changed a lot of things. And Perfect Diary took a lot of advantage to that by giving great customer service. But what also happened is that people started changing their purpose in life. Because of the pandemic and the lockdowns, they used key opinion consumers, people that were live streaming, actually were telling a story to help other people. And this was about education. And so the big difference between Western micro-influencers, you might call them KOCs, these micro-influencers in the West, it's not just about helping people, it's often about telling a story you want to tell. But in China, it's a lot about education. And so how to cook, how to make food. Maybe it's about how to put on certain cosmetics or certain dresses, or how to dress up, or maybe how to deal with a boyfriend or a girlfriend or whatever, or going to the gym or get healthy, or anything you can imagine is what influencers, these KOCs, key opinion consumers, are actually sharing with their friends. And that means that they have just maybe 100 or 1,000 followers, but they trust them blindly. And that is because there's a purpose behind the story. And that purpose is not just about education, it's also about having a more healthy life. Specifically for Generation Z and millennials, they want to have a more balance between their work and their free time, and they want to eat healthy and eat healthy products. And so that is really what the goal is now. It's all about purpose, and it's all about doing something valuable with your leisure time, with your free time. But it's also about a societal goal. And so the big difference in China today is that people that are following these KOCs, they want to know if these stories have some purpose for the future. And am I helping, for example, a farmer who's telling his stories about his tea leaves to actually make a better living? Because then I'm doing something good. This is about not just charity, it's about empathy. And I think the word empathy is not something that we always think about when it comes to China. But in live streams, you see it, because people are buying lots of products from people that they think need help and have great stories and great products to sell. And so that's a different thinking when we think about live streaming, but that's really the reality. So what we've seen in the lockdowns is that farmers, for example, were starting to create all these live streams online. And so people were following farmers because they were stuck in their own area. It means that their products could not be sold directly to the consumer or to the retailer. So now what happened is that Alibaba and JD, they helped them, and Pinduoduo, to live stream their stories online. And so these stories went then directly to the consumer, and the consumer, he thought, I like these farmers. They have funny stories, they have great authentic stories, they have something to tell. I trust these products, I trust how they grow their cattle maybe, or maybe their fruit, or whatever it is. And so people started buying because they had a little personal connection. And that is really what China is about. It's about entertainment, but it's about telling who they really are. And so I love this idea, because this is really not what we often think about China. Now, the other thing is about customer care. And whenever you've gone to China, you know that customers are really demanding. Now imagine a company like Ctrip, which is the biggest travel company in China and number 2 in the world. Well, they have a lot of problems to take care of. People have booked a hotel, it's overbooked, maybe the flight is delayed. I mean, you can imagine that. But the biggest problem was during the pandemic. When there was the lockdowns, people couldn't travel anymore. This was a worldwide problem. Booking.com had to lay off a lot of people. Well, Ctrip and its founder, James, he really thought of a completely new idea. He thought, I'm going to dress up. And I think this is genius. So he dressed up in different traditional clothes, and the clothes was actually referring to the locations that he wanted to promote in the travel domestically within China. So he went to all these provinces and all these places which people hadn't heard about maybe, and he was telling an old story from maybe 100 or 1,000-year old. And he was playing like an actor. I mean, do you imagine the CEO of Facebook or Google dressing up and trying to tell a story about their origin or the origin of the internet or whatever? I mean, this is what's happening, and it's not just him. I mean, most CEOs in China were actually starting to live stream. From McDonald's, from KFC, from Starbucks. I mean, you saw that everywhere started to live stream. And so this shows that in China, this is all about this personal communication, personal trust, authenticity, and going back to the roots. And so this helped him a lot, because after the lockdowns were not anymore there, then many people started traveling to these places and he made money again. The company was back on track, and they didn't have to let anyone go. I love this story because it shows about how much Chinese care about others. Another thing we don't always believe. Now, in the pandemic or during the pandemic, what also happened is that it went one step further. It wasn't just about these consumers anymore, key opinion consumers, it went to key opinion employees. And what that meant is that anyone who had anything to sell in the retail, for example, when you want to sell cars, or you want to sell your food, or you want to sell games, or maybe you're a DJ, or whatever you do, you wouldn't be able to have done it during the lockdown, so what they did is live stream it. And because there's this interaction with people, they can actually talk with people that are watching the live streams, and these people can actually sell the products instantly. And so you could sell cars, you could sell houses or apartments, you could sell anything, an airplane if you want to. So crazier you can think of it, it's possible in China. But what's interesting with that is that actually every Chinese now is starting to become an actor. If you are an employee of a company, a large multinational or a large Chinese company, unless you know how to live stream, it's going to be very, very difficult to find a job. More difficult. Live streaming is the biggest sought after job vacancy anywhere. So everybody needs to become an actor, and China is showing that way. Now, this is all going to be what I call business as social, instead of business as usual. And so instead of going into more convenience and more transactions and more e-commerce like we know, now it's all about communities. It's all about people that trust each other. It's all about having the people that work with you become a face. They have to show their face on camera so people know who they really are. And so that is the way you know what's happening behind the scenes. So I always say, this is how you see that China's actually becoming more transparent. I know many people don't believe that, but look at live streams. And this is what it's all about. It's about showing who you really are and showing, in many aspects, that you're a good person and want to do good for society or for anything. And so this has become such a big hit that today, most young people are actually thinking of becoming live streamers. And so you see schools popping up, you see multi-channel networks popping up. And I mean, there's thousands, we're talking about 20, 30,000 multi-channel networks. That's actually agents that help these live streamers or people to become a live streamer. They do about 1,000 interviews a day, some of them, and they choose like 1%, and so that 1% becomes a live streamer. And so today it became an industry. It's not a trend anymore. And so those who have really succeeded to become a really famous KOL or KOC, what they do is they have like many, many followers, but more important, they know exactly how to gain the trust with their people by telling authentic stories and then getting people to buy them. And so this is crazy because we're talking about more than 10 million people in China, some say 13 or 15 million, that are making a living every single day with live streaming. This has become a business, an industry. It's not a trend anymore. And so this is now going global. We'll see that happening in the next years. Now, the other thing is that when anything in China becomes a big trend and a big industry, and there's a lot happening specifically on social media, the government gets a little bit worried because besides the fact that these all sounds great things like creators and there's authenticity and it's about trust and it's about sharing and communicating, well, there's also people that take advantage of the system. And there's a lot of people in China just because there's a lot of people in the population. And so what happens is that China and the government and Beijing is now cracking down on these live streamers. And so a lot of people say, oh, is this the end of live streaming? Well, not at all. They're just trying to get the industry as healthy as possible and control it in a way so it doesn't get out of hand. And so there's 4 things that really the government is looking at. It's about getting this healthy fan power. What that means is that some fans have just so much power that they could gather a lot of people to actually raise their voice and destroy things that the government wants to build. Another story, but this is really what it's about in some cases. But more importantly, they want to protect the young people. And so a lot of young people got addicted to these live streams, addicted to gaming as well. And so they're trying to prevent that these children, when they're very young, they're actually using maybe their parents' money or their own money or whatever it is to do things that they shouldn't be doing because it's actually not healthy. They also want to have more code of conduct. And this has a little bit to do with just making sure that there's no extremes. I mean, it's not that they want to tell people what they should tell others, but they have to have kind of like a code of conduct in general within the live streaming. Something we're not used to in Western internet, but that is quite normal in Chinese internet. And ultimately, they want to have healthy products and a healthy society. So if there's scams or people trying to rip other people off, I mean, that's not okay. Or certain products which aren't very good, I mean, these will be not allowed on live streamings anymore. So we're going to see, like in every industry, that now this is getting put under certain framework or in a certain framework. And then it's not because there's a framework that inside this framework, this is not going to go crazy still. That's what China is all about. But now we shouldn't look at the frame, we should look at what's happening inside the frame. And so the interesting thing is that there's new trends also happening now. And so a company like Perfect Diary already gave a first impression during the pandemic where they had what we call virtual KOLs. And a virtual KOL is actually kind of like an anime, or it's not a real person. It's a 3D maybe person, a hologram, and so they will actually sell the products and talk to the people and do the influencing or the live streaming. And so this is quite interesting because you see many companies going into that direction. But this is something here to stay. Now, whether virtual KOLs or real KOLs will be more popular, my feeling it's always going to be about real people because that is what people connect with. But you see some of these virtual KOLs already having 2 million followers. It's crazy. Other trends you see is brands that have been created from KOLs. So the KOLs have created their own brand, but they've also become a brand on themselves. And so sometimes the KOL is a more popular brand than the actual brand they're promoting. And so this is becoming a different power play between KOLs and between the brands. And it's very interesting to look at that. The other thing is that it's all about being more aware and sensitive. And so the culture is very important these days. If you say wrong things as a KOL, the whole social network environment, all the netizens in China will actually not follow you as a leader anymore, as an influencer. They will move away, you'll get bashed, and you will lose your reputation. So when brands work with certain KOLs and they make decisions, these brands or the KOLs, like Chris Wu, are making some decisions, like this was a sexual assault that he was that they were talking about on social media, the Me Too in the West. Well, when you have these kind of environments which have not a positive impact and or a cultural awareness of what China is really about, these become very sensitive topics. And what that means is that these KOLs, these influencers, are losing their reputation. And so when brands do something which is not positive in that direction, the KOLs linked to them also will be impacted, and they often then don't want to represent these brands anymore. So we have to be more aware of the fact that China is looking more at its culture and at a positive impact. And this could be about environment, which is great. It could be about society, it could be about anything which is considered be healthy within the growth of China. So to conclude, I would like to say, when we think about influencers, we think about KOLs, we think about live streaming, we often think about this is just people selling just like in the West. But actually, if you dig more deep, what you see is that this really reveals some of the things between people in China, between Chinese, that have a great positive influence. And this has to do a lot with authenticity. It's about telling the real story. This is not about propaganda. It's about trust. And so we don't always trust China, but they figured out a way through live streaming and other communication channels that this is their best way of trusting each other. And so this is also why it's so popular, is because this has created the trust that's been around for 2,000 years. This is about family and friends. It's also about culture and going back to the cultures and the colors and the meanings and everything that the culture really appreciates. But ultimately, you see that you also have the caring aspect. Live streamings are used to show to people that they care. And specifically in the lockdowns, you saw that companies like Ctrip were actually communicating with their customers, and Perfect Diary as well, to help them. It wasn't just about selling products online. This was really about understanding and trying to know what the problems are and helping people cope with the lockdowns, cope with the pandemic. It's also about creativity, something we also don't always think about China, but they're extremely creative within the live streams, and they're creating their own products, their own brands, their own stories. It's really fun. On top of it, it's a bottom-up thing. And we always think that a lot of things that happen in China is controlled top-down. But the live streaming is really about just consumers. People from everywhere in the world, in China, that have a story to tell and want to share it. And want to use these live streams to actually maybe sell and make some money and become more famous so they actually can sustain their life. So this is a bottom-up movement. It's not a top-down movement. And so the government is not trying to just crush it. They're just trying to figure out, because there's all these healthy things around it, there's this purpose around it, they're trying to figure out how to keep it within certain barriers so it actually evolves in a positive way. It's the funny thing about these live streams is that it's extremely entertaining, like everywhere in the world. But the interesting thing about this entertainment is that this also happens to employees, to farmers, to people you wouldn't expect that they would become these influencers. And the real reason this is happening is because these platforms have really created that opportunity. And so China has become a trendsetter in that case. It's really about combining this social media, this e-commerce, these stories. It's about combining that interaction that's happening in certain pools or groups, you could call it, social groups that they communicate, which they trust each other. And so China has been very good at combining all these things into one platform. And now there's many of these platforms. So there's many KOCs, many influencers. Ultimately, the most important is that this whole live streaming industry is getting more and more in the direction of a purpose. And this is about having a more healthy life. And Chinese really want to express and follow people that express that having a better life and how to do it is actually the way to go. And so I believe that live streaming is here to stay. It's become a huge industry in China, but we should look at live streaming to actually understand what's happening underneath and what it means for society. And in my view, live streaming is really the beginning for the whole world, for us all to become actors. So I would say the show is on, and we all can look at China to learn to become the great actors that everybody trusts, are authentic, and have a great purpose in life. Hope you liked it. I see you next week for another episode on Pascal's China Lens.